The 8th estate is an idea wherein every person has a God-given right to cognitive liberty.
Liberty and security are ideas. They're states of being, they're states of mind, and so is 8th Estate. As a media company, it's the place where anyone has the right to information, for information is infinity.
9/11 synchronicity.
The more you participate, the more information you get access to.
There is no freedom without cognitive liberty.
And I'm Betty Nguyen. Take a look at your screen right now because we are watching the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, which is holding a hearing right now dealing with the misleading information from the battlefield. They're going to be looking at two cases in particular, one dealing with Pat Tillman, who was killed in Afghanistan. At first we learned that it was because of insurgent fire, but then later we learned that it was actually from friendly fire. They're also going to be looking into the story of Private Jessica Lynch, her capture and rescue in Iraq back in March of 2003. The Defense Department, in fact, disseminated some information that turned out to be misleading and inaccurate. So they're going to try to get to the bottom of this information. Who sent it out? Why was it wrong? I want to take you back now to Washington and that hearing on misleading information from the battlefield. We're listening right now to Kevin Tillman, the brother of Pat Tillman, who was killed by friendly fire in Afghanistan.
Well-armed enemy. Did it appear that the enemy's volume of fire into the kill zone diminished? Above the din of battle, Corporal Tillman was heard issuing fire commands to take the fight to an enemy on the dominating high ground. Always leading from the front, Corporal Tillman aggressively maneuvered his team against the enemy position on the steep slope. As a result of Corporal Tillman's effort and heroic action, the trail element of the platoon was able to maneuver through the ambush position of relative safety without suffering a single casualty. The fight that ensued at Corporal Tillman's position increased in intensity. Corporal Tillman focused all his efforts on keeping the men of his team safe while continuing to press the attack himself without regard for his own personal safety. In the face of mortal danger, Corporal Tillman illustrated that he would not fail his comrades. His actions are in keeping with the highest standards of the United States Army. This was a narrative that inspired countless Americans as intended. There was one small problem with the narrative, however. It was utter fiction. The content of the multiple investigations reveal a series of contradictions that strongly suggest deliberate and careful misrepresentations. We appeal to this committee because we believe this narrative was intended to deceive the family, but more importantly, to deceive the American public. Pat's death was clearly the result of fratricide. It was due to a series of careless actions by several individuals in our own platoon after a small harassing ambush. During this uncontrolled shooting, the driver of the vehicle himself recognized friendlies immediately, but kept driving for approximately 400 meters, while the soldiers in the back of his truck continued to shoot at the hillside where the U.S. soldiers were and civilians. The vehicle saw arms and hands waving, smoke was flying, pin gun flares. An Afghan soldier was immediately recognized. They never felt threatened, and they still shot up the village unprovoked. The vehicle behind them clearly saw the U.S. soldiers on the hillside and were calling ceasefire. The end results were the death of Pat and the Afghan soldier, as well as 2 more soldiers wounded in the village. The signs were available, but the decision to shoot was made. This was not some fog of war. They simply lost control. According to the sworn statement on April 26 by the fellow soldier who was right next to Pat, literally right next to Pat. Thank you, sir. Quote, "I remember watching the friendlies just shooting at us. A 50 cal rolled up into our sights and started to unload on top of us. They would work in bursts, 50 cal for 10 to 15 seconds, 240 Bravo 10 to 15 seconds, back and forth. Specialist Tillman and I were yelling, stop, friendlies, cease fire. But they could not hear us. Tillman came up with the idea to let a smoke grenade go. They stopped This stopped the friendly contact for a few moments, and that's when I realized the AMF soldier was dead. At this time, the GMV rolled into a better position to fire on us. We thought the battle was over, though, so we were relieved, getting up, stretching out, and talking with one another, when I heard some 5.56 rounds coming from the GMV. They started firing again. That's when I hit the deck. Specialist Tillman, at this time, was hit by small arms fire. I know this because I could hear the pain in his voice as he called out, "Ceasefire, friendlies, I am Pat effing Tillman, damn it." He said this over and over again until he stopped, end quote. The facts of this case clearly show Pat and the Afghan soldier were killed by fellow members of his platoon, as well as the wounded soldiers on the hillside, and they knew this immediately. Revealing that Pat's death was a fratricide would have been yet another political disaster during a month already swollen with political disasters, and the brutal truth that the American public would undoubtedly find unacceptable. So the facts needed to be suppressed. An alternative narrative had to be constructed. Crucial evidence was destroyed, including Pat's uniform, equipment, and notebook. The autopsy was not done in accordance to regulation, and the field hospital report was falsified. An initial investigation completed with 8 to 10 days before testimony could be changed or manipulated, and which hit disturbingly close to the mark, disappeared into thin air, and was conveniently replaced by another investigation with more palatable findings. This freshly manufactured narrative was then distributed to the American public, and we believe the strategy had the intended effect. It shifted the focus from the grotesque torture at Abu Ghraib and a downward spiral of an illegal act of aggression to a great American who died a hero's death. Over a month after Pat's death, when it became clear that it would no longer be possible to pull off this deception, a few of the facts were parceled out to the public and to our family. General Kinzinger was ordered to tell the American public May 29th, 5 weeks later, that Pat died of fratricide, but with a calculated and nefarious twist. He stated, quote, there was no one specific finding of fault, end quote, and that he, quote, probably died of fratricide, end quote, but there was specific fault, and there was nothing probable about the facts that led to Pat's death. The most despicable part of what General Kinzinger told the American public was when he said, quote, the results of this investigation in no way diminish the bravery and sacrifice displayed by Corporal Tillman, end quote. This is an egregious attempt to manipulate the public into thinking that anyone who would question this 180-degree flip in the narrative would be casting doubt on Pat's bravery and sacrifice. Such questioning says nothing about Pat's bravery and sacrifice, any more than the narrative for Jessica diminishes her bravery and sacrifice. It does, however, say a lot about the powers who perpetrated this. After the truth of Pat's death was partially revealed, Pat was no longer of use as a sales asset and became strictly the Army's problem. They were now left with the task of briefing our family and answering our questions. With any luck, our family would sink quietly into our grief and the whole unsavory episode would be swept under the rug. However, they miscalculated our family's reaction. Through the amazing strength and perseverance of my mother, the most amazing woman on earth, our family has managed to have multiple investigations conducted. However, while each investigation gathered more information, the mountain of evidence was never used to arrive at an honest or even sensible conclusion. The most recent investigation by the Department of Defense Inspector General and the Criminal Investigative Division of the Army concluded that the killing of Pat was, quote, an accident. The handling of the situation after the firefight were described as a compilation of, quote, missteps, inaccuracies, and errors in judgment, which created the perception of concealment.